I mean, not formally, you were Mama Cass, and you were a bit of a hippie, if that's not pushing things too far, and a bit way
Just
out.
me and Sir Cecil Beaton, you were the hippies.
She stood on the stage at the London Palladium, tears streaming down her face, accepting a standing ovation she'd waited her whole life to hear. 2 days later, she was gone. This is the story of talent, turmoil, and tragedy. The last days of Mama Cass. Ellen Naomi Cohen was born on September the 19th, 1941 in Baltimore, Maryland, into a Jewish family with four grandparents who had all immigrated from Russia. Her father, Philip, worked in various business ventures before finding success with a lunch wagon business. Her mother, Bess, played piano, and Philip was an opera buff. Music filled their home, but the family faced financial stresses and uncertainties throughout Ellen's childhood. From an early age, Ellen knew she was different. By age 4, she could speak 4 languages. Her IQ was later measured at 165, placing her in the genius range. But she was also heavy, and in the 1940s and 50s, that set her apart in painful ways. She later said she'd been fat since age 7. Being overweight made her a target, but she learned to use her intelligence and humor as armor. She developed an independent streak, a way of carrying herself that made it clear she wasn't going to apologize for who she was. The family moved to Alexandria, Virginia, when Ellen was young. In high school, she discovered the stage. Acting gave her a place where being different wasn't a liability, it was an asset. She sang in the choir, appeared in school theater productions, and found that she had a voice that could command attention. Not just any voice, but something powerful and clear with remarkable range. When she opened her mouth to sing, people stopped what they were doing and listened. In high school, she adopted the name Cass, possibly borrowed from actress Peggy Cass. It was just Cass, not Cassandra, a name that felt more like her than Ellen ever had. After graduation, she didn't follow the traditional path her parents had hoped for. Instead, at 17, she headed to New York City to chase her dreams of performing on Broadway. New York in the late 1950s and early 1960s was alive with folk music and the beginnings of what would become the counterculture movement. Greenwich Village was the epicenter, with coffee houses and small clubs where young musicians gathered to play, to listen, to learn from each other. Bob Dylan was there, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger, and hundreds of others who'd go on to shape the music of the decade. Cass threw herself into that world with everything she had. She toured briefly with the musical The Music Man, getting a taste of life on the road. In 1962, she auditioned for the Broadway production of I Can Get It For You Wholesale, competing against dozens of other hopeful singers for a chance at the big stage. That role went to a young woman named Barbra Streisand, who was about to become a star. The rejection stung, but Cass kept moving forward. She wasn't interested in traditional paths anyway. Broadway was fine, but the folk music scene was where her heart was. She met Tim Rose at college and sang with his group, The Big Three. In 1964, she joined the Mugwumps, a folk group that included Denny Doherty, Zal Yanovsky, and John Sebastian. They played clubs around Greenwich Village, developing a following in the tight-knit folk community. The Mugwumps even released a single for Warner Brothers Records, though it didn't make much impact at the time. But Cass wasn't discouraged. She adopted the surname Elliott, taking it in memory of a friend who had died. Cass Elliott. It had a ring to it, a presence, a name that sounded like it belonged to someone who mattered. And in the village club, singing folk songs and working on her harmonies, Cass was learning her craft, developing the voice that would soon captivate millions. The Mugwumps didn't last long, but the connections Cass made there would change her life. She fell hard for Denny Doherty, the handsome Canadian singer with the smooth voice and easygoing charm. He didn't feel the same way about her, but she followed him anyway, from New York to California and back again, hoping he'd eventually see her the way she saw him. It was painful, unrequited love, but Cass was nothing if not persistent. By 1965, Denny Doherty had joined up with John Phillips and his wife Michelle Gilliam Phillips in a folk group called The New Journeymen. They were talented, but something was missing. Cass knew she belonged with them, She'd rehearsed with the group, but John Phillips didn't want her. He made up excuses. Her eyes were too close together. She didn't have the right vocal range. The real reason, many people believed, was that he thought her weight would hurt their image. So Cass got jobs as a waitress at the nightclubs where they performed. She'd serve drinks while they sang, humiliated but determined. Then, one night in late 1964 or early 1965, the four of them took LSD together. It was the first acid trip any of them had ever experienced, and as they sat there in the East Village, something magical happened. They started singing together, and the harmonies were perfect. The blend of their voices was undeniable. Even John Phillips had to admit it. Cass belonged in the group. The story of how they got their name has become legend. They were sitting around watching television, trying to come up with something better than the new Journeymen. Then the Hells Angels appeared on the Carson show, and someone said something about how they called their women their mamas. Cass jumped up. "Yeah, I want to be a mama," Michelle joined in. "We're the mamas." John looked at Denny. "The papas?" Problem solved. The mamas and the papas were born. Their first single, released in late 1965, was a song John Phillips had written while the group was living in a hotel in New York during one of the coldest winters on record. It captured that longing for California sunshine perfectly. They called it California Dreamin', and it became a massive hit, eventually selling over 1 million copies and reaching number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. The Mamas and the Papas exploded onto the music scene. Their first album, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, was released in February 1966 and shot to number 1. Their single, Monday, Monday, not only topped the charts, but won a Grammy Award. They had a sound unlike anything else, odd, 4-part harmonies that were tight and polished, but with an edge that spoke to the changing times. It was folk rock, but sophisticated, with a countercultural heart. And at the center of it all was Cass's voice, powerful and distinctive, carrying melodies that John Phillips specifically wrote to showcase her range. The group recorded albums at a pace that seems impossible now, hit after hit. I Saw Her Again, Words of Love, dedicated to the one I love. They were one of the biggest acts in America, their records selling millions. But success didn't mean happiness for Cass. She was in love with Denny Doherty, and he'd started an affair with Michelle Phillips. Cass had to watch them together, had to sing with them night after night, pretending her heart wasn't breaking. Once, when they were high, Cass proposed to Denny. He was so stoned, he couldn't even respond. The humiliation stayed with her. The group was known for their charisma and humor, and Cass was the most charismatic of them all. She was funny, optimistic, warm. She made everyone around her feel good. Her home in Laurel Canyon became a gathering place for musicians: Joni Mitchell, Eric Clapton, David Crosby, Stephen Stills, Graham Nash. Legend has it that Crosby, Stills, and Nash sang together for the first time in Cass's living room. In June 1967, John Phillips and producer Lou Adler organized the Monterey International Pop Festival, one of the first major rock festivals and a defining moment of the counterculture. The Mamas and the Papas performed as the closing act on the final evening. It would be the last time they performed together in a live concert, though nobody knew it at the time. By 1967, the cracks in the group were showing. John and Michelle's marriage was falling apart. There were fights, drug use, tensions pulling them in different directions. In October 1967, during a trip to England, Cass was arrested and charged with stealing blankets and keys from a hotel they'd stayed at on an earlier visit. She spent a night in jail before the charges were dropped for lack of evidence. But the incident forced the cancellation of Royal Albert Hall concerts and embarrassed everyone. Then, in April 1967, something happened that changed everything for Cass. She gave birth to a daughter, Owen Vanessa Elliott. Cass kept both the pregnancy and the identity of the father secret, and it wasn't revealed until later that the father was guitarist Charles Wayne Day. Suddenly, Cass's priorities shifted. She had a baby to think about now. In mid 1968, the Mamas and the Papas officially broke up. Cass was ready. Having the baby changed my life a lot, she told Rolling Stone that October. I don't want to go on the road. It's a matter of economics. I didn't want to go on the road, and I wanted to stay home with my baby. She immediately embarked on a solo career, signing a $40,000 a week contract to perform at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, starting in October 1968. This was huge. Cass Elliot was going to be the first counterculture artist to headline in Las Vegas. But she wanted to make a big impact, wanted to look different, more glamorous. So she went on a crash diet, fasting for days at a time. In 6 months, she lost over 100 pounds. The weight loss was too fast, too extreme. It wrecked her system. In the days leading up to opening night, she was sick with throat issues and fever, barely able to rehearse. When she finally took the stage that first night, her voice was weak and barely audible. The large crowd, full of celebrity well-wishers who'd come to support her, grew restless and unsympathetic. At the end of the show, Cass returned to the stage to apologize. "This is the first night and it will get better," she said. Then she sang "Dream a Little Dream of Me" and left to half-hearted applause. The second show was worse. Her voice was failing, and many in the audience noisily walked out. The reviews were brutal. Esquire called the show a disaster that was heroic in proportion, epic in scope. Newsweek compared it to the Titanic. Like some great ocean liner embarking on an ill-fated maiden voyage, Mama Cass slid down the waves and sank to the bottom. After 2 nights, the engagement was canceled. Cass went home to Laurel Canyon and checked into a hospital for 8 weeks, devastated and humiliated. But Cass didn't give up. That wasn't in her nature. She spent the next few years rebuilding her career, finding her way as a solo artist. In 1969, she had a hit with "It's Getting Better," which climbed to number 30 on the charts. In 1970, "Make Your Own Kind of Music" became her signature solo song, reaching number 36. The message resonated deeply with her. Sing your own special song, make your own kind of music, even if nobody else sings along. Between 1968 and 1973, she released 5 solo albums, each one showing different sides of her artistry. None of them were huge commercial successes, but they established her as a legitimate solo artist with a distinctive style. She was finding her voice in more ways than one, moving away from the folk rock sound of the Mamas and the Papas towards something more sophisticated, more cabaret-influenced. She became a television personality, appearing on variety shows where her humor and warmth shone through. She guest-hosted The Tonight Show multiple times. She co-hosted The Mike Douglas Show for a week in 1974. She had her own TV specials in 1969 and 1973. She appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, The Carol Burnett Show, Hollywood Squares. America saw her funny, warm personality and fell in love with her all over again. She tried different musical directions. An album and tour with British rocker Dave Mason in 1970 didn't work out, critically panned and commercially disappointing. She returned to Las Vegas, this time playing smaller venues, working her way back up. She got better at performing solo, learned to work a room, developed confidence in her cabaret-style act. Her final album, released in 1973, was titled "Don't Call Me Mama Anymore." It was a declaration of independence, a statement that she'd outgrown the group identity. She was Cass Elliot now, not Mama Cass. She valued her independence more than anything. As she said in what would be one of her final interviews, "I'm independent. I value my freedom to live and love as I want more than anything else in the world. I never created the big mama image. The public does it for you, but I've always been different. I got into the habit of being independent, and the habit became a design for living." In early 1974, she appeared on The Tonight Show in May, looking tired but happy, talking about her heavy touring schedule. She'd been on the road since November with only a Christmas break. "I'm just so glad to be home," she told Johnny Carson. "I've got to leave again in July." That July engagement was the dream gig she'd been working toward. 2 weeks at the London Palladium, one of the most prestigious venues in the world, comparable to Carnegie Hall in America. This was validation, proof that she'd made it as a solo artist, that she was more than just a former mama. The 2 week run at the Palladium began in mid July 1974. Every show sold out. Every night, Cass poured her heart into the performance, giving the audience everything she had. Her voice was strong, her confidence high. This was the Cass Elliot she'd always wanted to be: polished, professional, respected not just for her voice, but for her artistry. The audiences loved her. Night after night, standing ovations. Critics praised her performances. Producer Lou Adler came to see one of the shows and said Cass was really up. She felt she was opening a new career. She'd finally got together an act she felt good doing. Not prostituting herself, but middle of the road people enjoyed it, and she enjoyed doing it. On the final night, Saturday, July 27th, 1974, Cass looked at a picture of Judy Garland backstage and said to her stage manager, Bobby Roberts, "I know what it must have meant to that lady to be a hit here, because I know what it means to me." Judy Garland had triumphed at the Palladium. Now Cass had too. When the show ended and the audience rose to their feet in another standing ovation, Cass was overcome with emotion. She'd done it. She'd proven herself. She'd made the transition from Mama Cass to Cass Elliot. After the show, she went back to the apartment where she was staying. A flat in Mayfair at 9 Curzon Place, on loan from her friend Harry Nilsson, the singer-songwriter. She called Michelle Phillips, her old friend and bandmate, and cried with happiness. She had had a little champagne and was crying, Michelle later recalled. She felt she had finally made the transition from Mama Cass. The next day, Sunday, July 28th, Cass was in high spirits. She attended a brunch hosted by Georgia Brown, but friends noticed she didn't seem quite right. She was coughing, blowing her nose, struggling to breathe properly, but she was happy, still riding the high of her successful shows. From the brunch, she went to a cocktail party at Jack Martin's place. By evening, it was clear she was exhausted. She'd been partying for too long, celebrating too hard, but she was still smiling, still that warm, generous Cass everyone loved. She left the party around 8 p.m. and went back to Harry Nilsson's apartment. She went to bed probably thinking about her triumph, about the standing ovations, about the new chapter in her career that was just beginning. She never woke up. On Monday, July 29th, several people stopped by the apartment during the day, friends, staff, but they didn't enter Cass's room, assuming she was sleeping. Finally, her secretary Dot McLeod tried calling her repeatedly without success. She went to the flat and found Cass's body in bed. Cass Elliot had died of heart failure. She was 32 years old. The autopsy showed no drugs in her system, no evidence of choking or trauma. Dr. Keith Simpson, the coroner who performed the autopsy, determined she'd suffered heart failure, likely related to the strain obesity had placed on her system over the years. Her heart had simply given out. But that's not the story the world heard. Within hours of her death, a rumor started spreading that Cass had choked to death on a ham sandwich. There was a sandwich on a nightstand near her bed, untouched, but somehow that detail got twisted, embellished, turned into a joke. Cass's manager, Alan Carr, called her friend Sue Cameron, who was working as a columnist for The Hollywood Reporter. He was hysterical. "You've got to tell them that she died choking on a ham sandwich," he told Cameron. "You must go to your typewriter and write that. There's a half of a ham sandwich on her nightstand." Cameron didn't ask questions. She wrote the story. Years later, Cameron explained why Carr wanted that version of events out there. He was afraid people would think it was a drug overdose, that it would tarnish Cass's reputation. A sandwich seemed harmless, almost funny. Except it wasn't funny at all. It turned Cass's death into a punchline, a joke that comedians would tell for decades. Fat jokes, choking jokes, cruel, thoughtless jokes at the expense of a woman who'd fought her whole life against that kind of mockery. Michelle Phillips later spoke angrily about David Crosby's role in perpetuating the sandwich myth in his writings about Cass. The lies took on a life of their own. At Cass's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 1998, Michelle made a point of honoring her memory, saying she knew Cass was looking down on them, wearing a size 6 Thierry Mugler dress. Cass's daughter Owen, who was only 7 years old when her mother died, grew up hearing the sandwich jokes. In my younger years, when people would talk to me about my mom, it was always about the stupid sandwich, she said decades later. In 2024, on the 50th anniversary of her mother's death, Owen spoke to the BBC to set the record straight once and for all. There was a ham sandwich, but she didn't eat it and she didn't choke on it. So enough with the jokes. Cass's body was returned to the United States and buried at Mount Sinai Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Her sister, Leah Kunkel, received custody of Owen and raised her. The funeral was attended by friends, musicians, people whose lives Cass had touched with her warmth and generosity. 4 years later, in a strange and tragic coincidence, Keith Moon of The Who died in the same apartment, in the same bedroom where Cass had died. He was also 32 years old. Harry Nilsson, understandably, could never bring himself to go back to that flat again. The Mamas and the Papas were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998. In 2005, Cass received a posthumous Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2022, she was finally given a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, an honor her daughter Owen fought for years to achieve. At the ceremony, Owen said, "What a fantastic day. It's amazing to see all the people who have come out to celebrate my mother and her achievements nearly 5 decades after she's gone." Cass's music has endured. California Dreamin' remains an anthem of the 1960s. Monday, Monday still gets played on classic rock stations. Dream a Little Dream of Me has become a standard, covered by countless artists but never quite capturing what Cass brought to it. That combination of power and vulnerability, that sense of longing mixed with hope. Make Your Own Kind of Music has found new life in television shows and movies, its message of independence and authenticity resonating with new generations. It was the perfect song for Cass because that's exactly what she did. She made her own kind of music, lived her own kind of life, refused to apologize for being different. The tragedy of Cass Elliot isn't just that she died young, though that's certainly tragic. It's that she died just as she was finally achieving what she'd worked for her entire career. Those standing ovations at the Palladium, the tears of joy when she called Michelle Phillips, the feeling that she'd finally made the transition from Mama Cass to Cass Elliot, all of that happened in the last hours of her life. She'd spent her career fighting against other people's perceptions of her. John Phillips not wanting her in the group because of how she looked. The cruel reviews after the Las Vegas disaster, the constant focus on her weight rather than her talent. The heartbreak of loving Denny Doherty and never being loved back. And then, after she died, being reduced to a joke about a ham sandwich, her memory disrespected in the cruelest way possible. But here's what matters. Cass Elliot had one of the great voices of her generation. She broke barriers for women in rock and roll by simply being herself, by refusing to conform to what a female singer was supposed to look like or be like. She was talented, brilliant, funny, warm, and generous. Her home was a gathering place for the musical legends of the 1960s. She was a single mother who raised her daughter with love while building a career in one of the toughest industries in the world. In her final interview, she talked about independence, about making your own kind of music, about living life on your own terms. That's exactly what she did, right up to the end. She died happy, fulfilled, triumphant. She died knowing she'd proven herself at the London Palladium. She died believing the best was yet to come. That phone call to Michelle Phillips, crying with joy over her standing ovations, was Cass's last message to the world. Not a joke, not a punchline. Just a woman who'd fought for everything she had, who'd overcome every obstacle, who'd finally reached the mountaintop she'd been climbing her whole life. This was talent, turmoil, and tragedy. The last days of Mama Cass. but it was also triumph. And that's how she should be remembered. If you enjoyed learning about Cass Elliott's remarkable life and legacy, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories about the music legends who shaped our world. Share your favorite Mama Cass memory in the comments below. Thanks for watching.